You don't just bulldoze someone's life and call it progress. The gravel crunched under my boots as I stood at the edge of the orchard, the smell of freshly turned earth mixed with the crisp aroma of ripening apples, carrying a tension that settled deep into my chest. Morning sunlight sliced through the mist over the rolling hills, glinting off the leaves and highlighting the vibrant reds and yellows of fruit I had watched grow since childhood. My heart sank as I noticed the long streaks of tire marks across the soil where heavy machinery had passed, flattening the carefully maintained rows of apple trees. I could hear the faint hum of engines fading in the distance and the soft rustle of leaves, but it was the eerie silence of the orchard that hit me hardest, the absence of life in places where bees had been buzzing just hours before. I clenched my hands, feeling the coarse texture of my gloves and the rough bark of the nearest tree beneath my fingers, grounding myself in the reality of what had happened. Patty Whitmore's name echoed in my mind, her voice from the HOA meeting last month replaying like a recording, full of that syrupy sweetness she always used to mask her authority, the kind of charm that made her seem benevolent while leaving destruction in her wake. I remembered the way she had walked past the gates last year, clipboard in hand, inspecting every fence post and measuring every row, as if ownership was not defined by the land itself but by her approval. My gaze followed the broken lines of the orchard fence, splintered wood jutting at odd angles, and I could smell the faint scent of fresh-cut timber mixed with diesel, reminding me of the trucks that had rumbled across my property before I even had a chance to intervene. In that moment, the memories of my father teaching me to prune the trees, the early mornings picking apples, the sticky sweetness of the fruit pressed between my fingers, all collided with the reality of their absence, replaced by a cold, methodical pattern of chaos imposed by someone who thought she had the right to rearrange my world. The wind carried whispers of distant conversations from the construction crew, muffled but audible enough to catch fragments of Patty's orders, her calm but firm tone giving instructions as if she were orchestrating a symphony of upheaval. I could feel the sun warming my face, but it did little to offset the chill running down my spine, the sharp metallic tang of adrenaline mixing with the earthy scent of disturbed soil. Every step I took across the orchard felt heavier, my boots sinking slightly into the soft, recently churned earth, each imprint a testament to what had been taken from me without warning. And yet, as I paused beneath the largest apple tree, the one I had planted with my own hands decades ago, I felt a quiet resolve stirring, the faint taste of determination on my tongue. I could almost hear the rustle of leaves speaking, carrying a message only I seemed to understand, whispering that this wasn't the end but the beginning of a reckoning. The horizon stretched wide, fields of apples fading into the early morning haze, and in that expansive silence, I made the unspoken promise to myself, whatever it took, I would set things right, and every decision, every permit, every line of law would be used as my instrument. The orchard might be scarred for now, but my mind was already running through the steps, the subtle turns and careful maneuvers I would need to reclaim what was mine, and the rush of anticipation, mixed with the smell of wet earth and dew, surged through me as I took the first step toward that plan. The first rays of sunlight spilled across the horizon, illuminating the gentle slopes of the orchard in shades of gold and amber, and I could feel the warmth on my skin as I walked among the fallen branches and upturned soil. Each step carried the faint scent of crushed apples, sweet and tangy, mingling with the lingering aroma of diesel from the heavy equipment that had passed through just hours before. I ran my fingers along the rough bark of a tree that had survived the worst of the chaos, tracing the grooves and knots, remembering the countless mornings my father and I had spent pruning and harvesting together. The memory of sticky hands and the cold bite of morning dew on my bare arms contrasted sharply with the current scene of disruption, yet it anchored me to what truly mattered, the connection to the land and the history embedded in every row of trees. The wooden crate I had built for the first harvest sat abandoned, its familiar weight and earthy scent a reminder of routines that had once brought a quiet joy. I paused by the small irrigation ditch, noting how the water reflected the sunlight in thin ribbons, still flowing steadily despite the disturbance, carrying with it the subtle aroma of wet soil and green vegetation. Inhaling deeply, I centered myself, feeling the tension in my shoulders begin to ease as I considered the long hours of work and care that had gone into maintaining the orchard, the knowledge of every bend in the rows, every graft and bud, everything cultivated by hand over decades. The wind shifted slightly, bringing with it the distant sound of crows and the soft murmur of the nearby creek, and with it came the realization that the farm still had life, resilience woven into its very structure. I crouched to examine the broken trellis, feeling the splintered wood beneath my fingertips, the texture grounding me in a tangible understanding of what had been damaged and what could be restored. My mind ran through the list of tools, the repairs, the replanting, and the adjustments that would be necessary, each task familiar and comforting in its methodical nature. The scent of apples mixed with the subtle perfume of wildflowers growing along the fence line, a reminder that the orchard had its own rhythm and would continue to thrive with careful attention. I allowed myself a moment to listen, the crunch of gravel underfoot blending with the gentle hum of morning insects, the rustle of leaves in a soft breeze, each sound reinforcing the sense of continuity, a quiet assurance that the farm and I were part of the same enduring story. As I stood upright, brushing soil from my gloves, I felt a renewed determination settle in my chest, a steady heartbeat matching the pulse of the land beneath me. The orchard had been challenged, yes, but it had not been broken, and neither had my resolve. Every tree, every crate, every furrowed row held memories and potential, and as I surveyed the expanse, the warm sunlight highlighting the contours of the land, I could already see the path forward, methodical and deliberate, ready to rebuild and reclaim what was rightfully mine, with care, patience, and an unwavering sense of purpose. The distant hum of a pickup truck on the gravel road reminded me that the neighborhood was waking up, the smell of morning coffee drifting faintly from the farmhouse kitchen, mixing with the crisp scent of apples and freshly turned earth. I moved carefully among the damaged rows, my gloves brushing against the rough bark, tracing the splits and broken branches as if reading a story written into the trees themselves. Every tree held a memory, a lesson, a quiet resilience that seemed to whisper encouragement with the soft rustle of its leaves. The morning light caught on dew droplets, turning them into tiny prisms that scattered across the fallen leaves and splintered wood, a subtle reminder that beauty could endure even in the midst of disruption. I paused at the edge of the irrigation channel, watching the water wind its way through the orchard, glinting silver in the sunlight, carrying with it the faint, earthy smell of wet soil and vegetation, proof that the natural rhythm of the land was still intact. The sound of birdsong punctuated the quiet, each note a gentle counterpoint to the residual hum of machinery, signaling that life continued, that the orchard had not surrendered to the chaos of yesterday. I crouched to examine the toppled crate, noting how its structure, though battered, still held form, its familiar scent of pine and apple sap grounding me in the tangible reality of the orchard I knew so well. My mind wandered through the routines of care I had learned from my father, the meticulous pruning, the careful monitoring of soil and water, each step a meditation that connected me to the land on a level deeper than words. The air carried a soft, sweet tang from crushed apples, the smell interlacing with the faint, lingering aroma of diesel from the vehicles that had passed through, and I inhaled deeply, letting it settle into my senses, anchoring me to what remained. Walking past a broken trellis, my fingers traced the weathered wood, rough yet familiar, as I considered the path to restoration, each detail, every measurement, a step toward reclaiming control. I listened to the subtle symphony of the orchard, leaves brushing together, insects humming softly in the warm morning air, the distant call of a hawk overhead, each sound reinforcing the sense of continuity, a rhythm that had survived more than one disruption. The sun climbed higher, highlighting the contours of the land, warming my face as I surveyed the rows and furrows, noting which areas would need the most attention, where saplings could be replanted, where supports needed to be reinforced, each task forming a mental blueprint of action. I felt a steady pulse of determination, a quiet energy building with each step through the orchard, the texture of soil underfoot, the roughness of bark under my fingertips, the faint crunch of fallen leaves giving cadence to my thoughts, all combining into a sense of purpose. In that space, surrounded by the orchard that had shaped my life and carried my family history, I recognized the endurance embedded in every tree, every crate, every droplet of dew, and I knew that the path ahead, though meticulous and demanding, would lead to restoration, renewal, and the reaffirmation of the bond between the land and myself. Patty appeared at the edge of the orchard again that afternoon, clipboard in hand, her white blouse reflecting the sun and casting a sharp glare against the freshly disturbed soil. She walked slowly, deliberately, inspecting the rows of apple trees as though each scar in the earth were a minor inconvenience rather than a legacy that had been nurtured for decades. I could see the reflection of her polished shoes on the gravel pathway and hear the faint click of her heels, each step slicing through the ambient quiet, and I inhaled the mingled scents of warm earth and apple blossoms to steady myself. I remembered the conversations with my father about patience and observation, the hours spent learning how to read the signs of the orchard, how to anticipate the needs of each tree, and that knowledge anchored me in the midst of disruption. The wind shifted, carrying the subtle notes of distant honeysuckle and the crisp tang of autumn air, brushing against the leaves and moving them in gentle swirls that caught the sunlight, casting dappled shadows across the uneven ground. I crouched near the base of a young tree, running my hand along the twisted vine that had been uprooted, feeling the fibrous texture and the resilience embedded in the plant itself, and in that tactile connection I sensed a roadmap for repair, a sequence of careful adjustments that would restore both structure and growth. My eyes followed the neat lines of the orchard, noting where irrigation channels had been partially blocked, where crates had been overturned, and where the soil had compacted under heavy tires, each observation registering like a set of coordinates on a map, informing the precise interventions that would be required. The distant hum of the highway, the soft flutter of wings from birds taking flight at intervals, and the occasional rustle of small mammals moving through underbrush blended into a background rhythm that reminded me that life persisted, that the natural world was resilient, and that the orchard's pulse was still strong despite the interference. I adjusted my gloves, feeling the rough leather against my palms, the grip grounding me as I considered the tools and equipment I would need, the sequence of planting, pruning, and repairing, and the small victories I could achieve with methodical attention. Patty stopped for a moment, leaning slightly to note something on her clipboard, and the subtle tilt of her head and the quiet precision of her observation reminded me that her sense of control was rooted in assumption, in the expectation that her authority would be unchallenged, and in that recognition a calm clarity settled in my mind. Each detail, every furrow and leaf, every crate and irrigation pipe became part of a mental blueprint, a step-by-step guide to reclaiming the integrity of the orchard, and as I stood upright, feeling the warmth of the afternoon sun and the gentle breeze carrying the aroma of apple and soil, I understood the rhythm of restoration, the balance between observation, intervention, and patience, and the satisfaction that would come from watching the orchard gradually respond, realign, and flourish under deliberate care and consistent attention, asserting its enduring presence against the disruption that had briefly overshadowed it. I stepped back from the base of the largest apple tree, surveying the extent of the disruption with careful eyes, the sunlight catching the scattered leaves and broken branches in sharp relief, highlighting the contrast between the orderly rows I had maintained and the irregular scars left by the machinery. The smell of crushed apples hung heavy in the air, mingling with the earthy scent of disturbed soil, and each inhalation reminded me of the hours spent tending these trees, the lessons learned from my father about soil health, irrigation, and the subtle signals that each branch and leaf provided. I traced the lines of furrows with my eyes, noting where the soil had compacted and where water pooled unexpectedly, considering the adjustments needed to restore proper flow and ensure each tree would receive adequate hydration. Patty was moving along the perimeter, her shadow stretching long over the orchard, clipboard in hand, occasionally bending to inspect a tree or a disturbed patch of earth, her steps measured and deliberate, a constant reminder that she believed authority could override heritage. I could hear the distant call of a hawk circling overhead, the faint rustle of small mammals through the underbrush, and the gentle clink of an irrigation valve as it released water into the channel, each sound grounding me in the reality of the land, reminding me that life persisted even in the face of interference. I crouched beside a young sapling that had been shifted from its intended position, feeling the resilience in its roots and the strength in the remaining branches, formulating the precise movements required to right it without causing additional stress. The sunlight glinted off the dew still clinging to the leaves, casting tiny prisms across the soil, and I noted the way shadows shifted, giving subtle indications of uneven ground and compacted dirt that needed loosening. Every detail became a point of reference, a part of a mental map for methodical restoration, from the texture of the soil underfoot to the positioning of crates and support stakes, to the way water flowed along each contour of the orchard. I paused to touch the rough bark of the mature trees, the fibrous texture sending a familiar signal of stability, reminding me that the orchard had endured much before, and it could endure again. The soft hum of bees returning to the blossoms filled the background, a quiet testament to the orchard's inherent resilience, and the warm breeze carried the scent of apple and soil, anchoring me in the sensory richness of this place I had grown up with. Patty's presence, measured and meticulous, contrasted sharply with the organic rhythm of the orchard, yet it also clarified the lines of authority and preparation that I would need to reclaim control through careful planning, precise action, and thorough understanding of every rule, permit, and procedural step available. I allowed myself a moment to catalogue each observation, each adjustment, every potential intervention, all converging into a structured plan that balanced patience, attention to detail, and an intimate knowledge of the land, ensuring that the orchard would not only recover but thrive under my careful stewardship, asserting the enduring connection between caretaker and land, memory and action, heritage and meticulous restoration. As the afternoon sun shifted toward the west, casting long shadows across the orchard, I took a moment to study the array of documents, permits, and records spread out on the weathered wooden table inside the farmhouse. The smell of aged paper mixed with the faint aroma of apple cider fermenting in barrels nearby, creating a grounding environment that contrasted with the chaos outside. My fingers traced the embossed seals and signatures on the official permits, each one a potential leverage point, a subtle power embedded in bureaucracy that could be wielded carefully to protect the orchard. I remembered the way my father had explained the importance of understanding both soil and law, teaching me that cultivation extended beyond the land itself into the structures that governed it, and that patience combined with knowledge was the most powerful tool of all. The wind whispered through open windows, carrying the soft scent of flowers from the garden and the distant hum of a neighbor tending their own land, a reminder that the community pulsed around the orchard in rhythms that could be observed, interpreted, and anticipated. I methodically reviewed the applications Patty had submitted, noting the sequence of approvals and the timelines, the subtle inconsistencies that hinted at overreach, and the nuances in language that left room for reinterpretation. Each page revealed patterns, small opportunities to exercise the authority I had inherited or claimed through years of familiarity with the local regulations, and I could feel a quiet excitement building as the strategy began to crystallize. Outside, the orchard remained a tapestry of disrupted branches and bent saplings, yet the sunlight highlighted the resilience of certain trees, the green leaves untouched by recent disturbances, reminding me that even in apparent disorder, the underlying structure endured. I mapped the flow of irrigation, the placement of crates, and the alignment of rows in my mind, overlaying the details from the permits and official guidelines, constructing a framework where careful, lawful intervention could redirect the course of events. The distant sound of tractor tires on gravel punctuated the serene rhythm, signaling movement without urgency, and I let it guide my pacing as I organized notes, highlighted key phrases, and outlined a series of actions that could be executed without confrontation but with decisive authority. The afternoon light shifted again, warming my shoulders as I leaned over the table, the coarse texture of the documents beneath my hands reinforcing the tangible weight of the responsibility I bore. Each step I considered, each application reviewed, became part of a deliberate sequence, a choreography of legality that promised to restore balance and assert rightful stewardship. I could almost hear the orchard itself in response, a gentle rustling of leaves as if acknowledging the plan taking shape, the careful orchestration of knowledge and timing, patience and precision, all converging toward the moment when the orchard would not only recover but assert its presence fully, resilient and aligned under the careful management that had guided it through decades, awaiting the execution of a strategy grounded in both care and authority. By late afternoon, the sunlight had softened into a warm golden hue, casting long, gentle shadows across the rows of apple trees and illuminating the subtle undulations of the orchard's terrain. I walked along the gravel paths, my boots pressing softly into the soil, feeling the faint vibration from distant vehicles on the main road but otherwise enveloped by a profound silence that spoke louder than any voice could. The broken branches and bent saplings, once stark and jarring, now seemed like markers, guiding me toward the areas that demanded attention and care, each one a puzzle piece in the larger picture of restoration. I paused beneath a mature tree whose trunk had weathered storms and seasons alike, running my hands along the ridges of bark, tracing the grooves where decades of growth had left their imprint, and the smell of its resin mixed with the lingering sweetness of fallen apples, grounding me in the sensory reality of the orchard. In my mind, I traced the sequence of actions, recalling every permit, every regulation, every subtle loophole and authority embedded in the documents I had meticulously reviewed earlier, forming a coherent plan that would allow me to act with precision and assurance. The irrigation channels glistened with reflected light, flowing steadily despite the recent disturbance, and I noted how minor adjustments could redirect the water to areas most in need, a simple yet profound step toward re-establishing balance. The hum of insects, the distant call of birds, and the soft rustle of leaves in the light breeze provided a rhythm, a natural cadence that guided my thoughts as I considered the restoration of both structure and harmony, ensuring that the orchard's integrity would be reasserted through deliberate and informed intervention. Patty's presence at the perimeter, observing with her clipboard, highlighted the contrast. Between her procedural oversight and the organic life of the orchard, and the awareness of that contrast reinforced my clarity and resolve. I imagined the precise sequence of adjustments, the careful repositioning of crates and stakes, the targeted pruning and reinforcement, each task anchored in knowledge, legality, and care, designed to restore vitality without unnecessary risk or disruption. As I moved from tree to tree, feeling the rough textures of bark and soil, smelling the crisp scent of apples and earth, I began to see the orchard not as damaged but as a network of resilient life, ready to respond to attentive hands and thoughtful planning. Every observation, every touch, every calculated step contributed to a growing momentum, a quiet but powerful reclamation of the orchard's rhythm, structure, and health. The golden light softened further, bathing the landscape in warmth, and I felt a sense of quiet satisfaction, a readiness to implement each stage of the plan with patience and precision, confident that the orchard would not only recover but flourish fully under the guidance and care that had always defined our family's connection to the land, a testament to perseverance, knowledge, and the inevitability of rightful stewardship. The first hints of evening settled over the orchard, the sunlight softening into a golden amber that illuminated every curve of the land, highlighting the subtle recovery of the trees and the carefully aligned rows that were slowly returning to their intended form. I moved deliberately among the saplings and mature apple trees, feeling the cool soil under my boots and the rough texture of bark beneath my fingertips, each touch reinforcing my connection to the land and the work that lay ahead. The gentle hum of a distant tractor mixed with the soft rustle of leaves in a mild breeze, creating a rhythm that mirrored the methodical planning and execution that had brought me to this point. I noted how the irrigation channels flowed steadily now, reflecting the sunlight in thin, shifting lines that traced patterns across the orchard floor, proof that the adjustments I had made were guiding the water exactly where it was needed. Patty's distant silhouette at the edge of the property, clipboard in hand, remained visible, her movements measured and deliberate, yet the subtle shifts in the orchard indicated that her assumed control was now tempered by the structure I had restored. The fragrance of apple blossoms mingled with the earthy scent of disturbed soil, each inhale reinforcing the sense of progress, of order being re-established in a place that had once felt chaos-bound. I paused near a young tree that had been bent during the earlier disruption, feeling the strength of its trunk and the resilience of its branches, adjusting the support stakes and aligning them carefully to ensure proper growth and stability, each small intervention a tangible statement of stewardship and authority. The sound of birds settling for the evening and the occasional flutter of wings overhead provided a subtle soundtrack, a reminder that the orchard itself responded to attention, care, and deliberate intervention. I surveyed the broader landscape, noting the repaired rows, the repositioned crates, and the reinforced irrigation lines, each detail acting as a testament to the patience and precision that had guided every step of the recovery process. The warm light shifted as the sun approached the horizon, casting elongated shadows across the orchard and emphasizing the depth and resilience of the land, highlighting every repaired section and renewed sapling as proof that careful planning, informed action, and persistence had created a new balance. The air carried the mixed scents of earth, leaves, and the fading warmth of sunlight, grounding me in a sensory experience that reinforced the orchard's enduring presence. Each decision, adjustment, and measured step contributed to a growing momentum, a quiet but undeniable reclamation of space and order, establishing a rhythm where the orchard's life and structure coexisted harmoniously with the human interventions that guided its restoration. In that moment, as shadows lengthened and the day transitioned toward dusk, I recognized that the orchard had fully embraced the careful authority applied to it, responding with renewed vitality and structure, the subtle yet powerful reminder that deliberate, informed actions can restore harmony, reaffirm ownership, and transformed disruption into a testament of resilience and enduring stewardship. As twilight deepened over the orchard, painting the sky in soft shades of lavender and gold, I stood at the crest of the main hill, overlooking the rows of apple trees that had endured the day's events and now stood restored in careful order. The air was cooler, carrying the faint, crisp scent of fallen apples mixed with the earthy aroma of soil turned and settled, a reminder of both the disruption and the resilience that followed. My hands rested lightly on the rough bark of a nearby tree, feeling the subtle vibrations of the wind through its branches and the gentle shifting of leaves, each sound a quiet confirmation that life and growth had resumed their rhythm. I traced the path of the irrigation channels with my eyes, observing the steady flow of water reflecting the fading sunlight, each curve and turn restored to efficiency, a testament to the careful planning and attention that had guided every adjustment. Patty's silhouette could be seen in the distance, paused at the edge of the property, her movements measured, but the visible changes in the orchard spoke louder than any observation she could make, every repaired row and supported sapling signaling that her temporary influence had been superseded by a deliberate, lawful, and methodical restoration. The scent of apples, both ripe and still developing, filled the air, mingling with the subtle perfume of late-blooming wildflowers along the orchard margins, and I inhaled deeply, grounding myself in the tangible presence of what had been reclaimed. Walking along the gravel pathways, I noted the repaired crates, the realigned saplings, and the reinforced trellises, each detail a piece of a larger puzzle that had been completed with patience, careful thought, and an intimate understanding of both the land and the legal framework that protected it. The soft flutter of birds and the distant hum of evening insects provided a natural soundtrack, reinforcing the quiet yet powerful sense of order and balance that now defined the orchard. I paused to observe a mature tree whose branches had been bent earlier, now supported and upright, catching the last rays of sunlight and casting dappled shadows over the ground, a vivid reminder that deliberate intervention and persistence could restore harmony. Every step I took, every adjustment made, and every observation recorded contributed to the overall resilience and structure of the orchard, emphasizing that the combination of knowledge, patience, and lawful authority could reclaim and protect what was inherently mine. The horizon stretched wide, the warm glow of the sun giving way to the first hints of night, and as I took a final survey of the orchard, noting the interplay of light, shadow, and living growth, I felt a deep satisfaction, a quiet confirmation that balance had been restored, authority reasserted, and the orchard stood resilient, flourishing under care, structure, and the enduring vigilance of someone who understood both the land and the responsibilities it demanded, an enduring testament to the inevitability of thoughtful and patient stewardship.